Andrew, you talked about, you were asked about the changes the last
Yeah.
couple. Consistency obviously is something everybody would love to have, but how important is it to get fresh ideas, kind of change things up a little bit?
Yeah, I think you always want some new perspective. Like I think that's healthy in any organization. We'll always pride ourselves on trying to stay ahead of the curve and not remaining stagnant. That won't mean that we won't have some foundational things that we believe in, whether it's how we build the team, how we play, or how we run the operation. But at the same time, we're also not going to be afraid of making alterations if that's what we think is necessary.
I assume you used Callahan as a sounding board when it came to offensive line acquisitions, player changes. Where do you go from here without him?
Yeah, so Tony, I think I've mentioned this before. We always we take a collaborative approach in terms of how we build the roster. Like I've never been a part of a good organization where personnel and coaching didn't support one another, whether it was building the roster or on the field. So that'll really continue. And I would say this, like Andy and Roy, in and of themselves, they've been excellent in the personnel process so far. I think they're really good. Obviously, Bill is unusual. We will miss him. He's rare, and he's one of honestly my favorite coaches that I've ever worked with. But at the same time, life does go on, and we have a good process in place.
Are you comfortable with the amount of salary cap room you allocate to offensive line? You're in the top 5.
Yep, very happy with that. Like we will
continue that?
Yeah, we will be. So let me back up. So number one, we like linemen. Like no surprise, we like linemen. We will, at least as long as I'm the general manager here. Our investment in those positions will always be high. Now, I will qualify that with the way we think of investment isn't just necessarily in terms of cap dollars. Like, if we invest high picks in there, that may not show up on the, let's say, like the cash balance sheet, but that's a pretty significant resource that we're putting into the position group. So over time, as you look at the offensive line room, whether it's in terms of picks or dollars, that will be one of our higher resource position groups.
Do you fully expect Deshaun to participate, be a full participant in the offseason program in terms of being able to, or is it kind of contingent on what you see once he started to start throwing?
This is what I'll say about Deshaun. He's on track, starting throwing next month. I'm not going to get too far out in front of my skis, but we're really pleased and think that he's going to be just fine.
Will you have to redo that contract again?
Not necessarily.
A couple years ago, DeAnthony Bell became the first undrafted free agent that you guys kept, and then you have Ronnie Hickman and Mahmoud Diabate. Have you changed your approach in that, or is that just like the individual level of keeping undrafted free agents?
I think it's probably a little bit the individual level. That really is like a low odds avenue for like acquiring a 53-man roster player or a starter. So I think it will kind of a little bit ebb and flow. We like to think that we have a good process that can help us do better than the rest of the industry. But even then, it really is a little bit of a long shot bet. It's a credit to DeAnthony, it's a credit to Mahmoud, it's a credit to Ronnie in terms of how they've been able to position themselves over the past 2 years.
Will you do joint practices again with anybody this summer, and will you be going to the Greenbrier? And if you do joint, who will they be?
We will be going back to the Greenbrier, and we will be doing joint against the Minnesota Vikings. They'll be coming to our place.
So Berea?
They'll be coming to Berea, yeah. So you guys don't have to travel.
You expect a longer stay at Greenbrier?
Probably about the same time, honestly, Tony.
9 days?
Yeah, probably about the same time.
Defensive tackle or wide receiver, which is the greater need?
All the above. All the above.
Andrew, when you
Good try, though. I appreciate it. That's a good tone.
when you evaluate your wide receivers,
Yeah.
obviously you've got to do that. You've had your franchise quarterback for 12 games. Does that make it difficult to evaluate kind of how they fit together?
Maybe to a degree. Maybe it increases the degree of difficulty, but I don't know that I would say that it goes from easy to difficult. I think every roster deals with moving parts and injuries and fluctuations, and that's part of our job to assess it.
Andrew, I know you had a bunch of free agents, but Za'Darius might be the most high-profile one. How did you think he fit last year, and is he a guy that you're talking to, you'd like to see come back?
He fit really well, really pleased with his production. He was awesome in the room. We really loved having him around, and how all those pieces fit together, we're still working through.
Why do you want
Let me go actually first. I'll come back to you, Tony.
To go back to the tackles with DeJuan, I mean, obviously made really nice progression as a rookie, but when you have a rookie like that who has a season-ending injury, like what are the roadblocks potentially to, make sure that progress keeps going, especially now with new position coaches coming in?
One of the things that we did, and I think it's a credit to our player development function. We really just kept him, once he came back from the surgery, we kept him engaged as if he was still playing towards the end of the year, because we didn't want him to give back the progress that he made as he was preparing to be a starter. Because you see that with young players. It's almost like, okay, I have young kids, when they go to summer break, if we don't do any reading or we don't do any math, they take a step back from what they're learning. So we kind of took that approach. In terms of like the off season and progressing into next year, we feel pretty good about the plan that he'll have in place during the off season. Andy and Roy, they're excellent teachers. They're excellent coaches. So there's probably a little less concern in terms of that aspect of it.
Why did you submit a proposal to extend the trade deadline into November?
Yeah. So a couple reasons. We really had 4 goals in mind, Tony. Number one, we think as a league, it makes sense to give teams the most flexibility as long as possible to have the best product down the stretch run in the playoffs. Number two, we wanted to make sure that we could maintain the competitive integrity of the season, so you don't get into, like, let's say, player dumping late in the year. Number three, we wanted to retroactively correct the fact that the trade deadline never moved when the season expanded to 17 games. And then really number four, if at some point in the future the regular season expands to 18 games, we wanted to be proactive in terms of the positioning for the trade deadline. One of the things that we found, Tony, or I'll touch on 2 parts. You're probably getting more than you bargained for here, but I'll touch on 2 parts here. If you look at us compared to the other major sports leagues, if you look at their seasons by like calendar days or games played, baseball and basketball, they have the trade deadline at when 65% of the games are played. Hockey's at 78%. Currently, we're at 45%. Our proposal would move it to about 55% of the games played. And oh, by the way, over the last 10 years, the earliest that a team has been eliminated from postseason consideration has been week 11, and that happened in 2014 and 2016. And if you even look at the last 3, 27 or more teams are actually within 2 games of a wild card spot. So we felt that was like the sweet spot where we could add additional flexibility, we could be proactive in terms of how we're thinking about it, but it could also be at a time where teams are still competitive as they thought about the current
I
season.
can't think of a GM who would be against it. Why hasn't it
You'd be
happened?
surprised. You'd be very surprised. You'd be very surprised. I can't either. I feel the same way, Tony. So I may need to bring you to the annual meetings next year.
Is there something that get voted on?
So,
Meetings?
it's probably to be determined. Like, there are probably enough within the committee process. There's probably more discussion to be had on on the overall topic, and whether it goes to the floor, that'll probably be determined as we get closer to the annual meetings in March.
Or is there argument against?
You know what? I'm probably not the one to speak on it because it'll be dripped in sarcasm. So I'm just going to hold my tongue.
Organizationally, do you guys have an opinion on the kickoff, the hip drop, maybe the touchback rule?
Yeah. So hip drop, it is something that we think is pretty dangerous and something that we need to figure out a better way to handle, within the game. And then the kickoff rule, I think everybody agrees that what we saw this past year isn't the ideal aiming point. I know the special teams coordinators have been putting their heads together to come up with a good solution. And I anticipate that that's something that we'll see kind of in the next several weeks. So that's a little bit of a TBD.
Is it a formality to pick up the 5th-year option of Newsom?
Happy with Greg. As you know, I don't comment on
Sometimes
contracts
you
or. Oh, when did I?
I think when last year with who'd you pick up last year?
Nope.
Or Njoku.
No. Good try though. It was a good try.
Andrew, with Deshaun coming off
Yeah.
of the shoulder, do you have to dial him back at all in terms of the keeper game, the run game, his mobility, or will you just let it rip and do whatever Ken and Kevin want to do with it?
More the latter. Yeah.
Not to ask too deep into the contract situation, but for guys like Maurice Hurst who have the potential to come back, how important is a guy like that who is a big locker room guy who really created a culture for themselves?
Yeah, Cam, we really do. I was just really happy with the group that we had this year, and in an ideal world, we'd like to bring everybody back. I think we all know the practical realities of it, that we do have to make decisions and trade-offs, but it won't be for lack of effort. If the guy was productive for us and a good fit, we're going to try and make it work, to make it happen.
Andrew, just one question about Grant. I mean, I know it sounded like he came close to playing in that postseason game he wanted to, but how has he been this offseason? And then just the jump he took this year in Jim's system, like how much more do you think he can rise to that ceiling?
He's great and fully cleared. Wish it happened a week earlier. and just he's perfect for this system. He can match tight ends. He's really good in the run game. He's an excellent blitzer. He brings a ton of toughness and energy and swagger to our defense, and we're happy to have him for the next 3 years.
The offensive line coach from Philadelphia, was his contract up?
I'm not going to contract. I'm not going to contract. I'm not going to comment on.
How did you get him otherwise?
I'm not going to comment on that part of it. I just don't think it's appropriate. That's
If
all.
you guys have to start the season with 2 road games,
Mm-hmm.
do you fully embrace what that all might mean, and are you cool with that if it happens like that?
Absolutely. They tell us where to play. We'll play there.
I was gonna.
Last one here.
You were asked about the Brazil game at the podium, but what goes into the process of? Is there a lot of communication between you, Philadelphia, or Jacksonville, or whomever, with regards to international games in general, not just specifically?
So this is truly I'm not sure if it's appropriate for me to comment on that. So I will get back to you on that if it is.